Overview of the 2023 recommended budget for St. Charles County government. Glad to see so many folks here for that. So I think we're going to start out, Tracy is going to start us out, Tracy Bain, and I understand a number of department heads or other people are going to speak with us tonight about the request.
Yeah, that's correct. So just starting off, let's see here. Just want to give you a little guidance on where things will be in the budget book. There's an all fund summary on page 4, and then the general fund begins on page 5, and then the special funds begin on page 153. Okay, so on page 5 is the general fund summary. This executive recommended budget estimate. In 2022, we ended with a 5% increase in sales tax versus the budgeted 2%. In 2022, our sales tax is currently up 8.37% over 2021 through September. In 2021, our sales tax outperformed the forecasted 2% increase by actually increasing 10.2%. Taking that all into consideration, our 2023 budget, we are forecasting an increase of 5%. Continuing with the general fund revenues, that's going to be on pages 6 through 10. You'll notice that the Coronavirus Relief Fund transfer, there were $3.3 million transferred from the Coronavirus Relief Fund into the General Revenue Fund. That program closed out and was completed in June of 2021. The general fund expenditures, in 2023, we're recommending operating expenditures only up 6.7% from the 2022 budget. And that's holding things in good control considering how much inflation has caused trouble this year.
What was it the previous year that we were?
You know, I don't have that number off the top of my head.
But this is kind of in that line.
It is. And the majority of the costs are due to the fuel increase. We haven't been able to control that very much. And as you know, our patrol officers, they need to travel. We can't cut down on the amount of travel that's taken. That accounts for $221,000, just 1.7%. 1% of the increase is due to the medical examiner. There are increased costs and testing needed to be done. And then a remaining 4% makes up $550,000 of the increase, and that's just combining all the other operating expenses. Our self-insurance fund. So as you know, the county's self-insured for both medical and general liability insurance, and that has saved the county much money over the years. However, we do recommend that a $2.3 million transfer be made in 2023 to keep the fund on track. The majority of this is going to be covered by the general fund, $1.7 million. Then a few of the special revenue funds are going to be asked to contribute: Road and Bridge, Parks, Assessor, and other departments. In addition to this, the self-insurance fund is increasing the county share of employee benefits by 8%. 2023 personnel. The compensation plan revision based on years of service that is recommended results in an 11.5% increase in total salary costs. This is not to be confused with an individual raise. An individual raise is going to be dependent on their current salary and years of service. All employees, regardless of years of service, will receive a 2% COLA at a minimum. And then just to reiterate, the employee health care costs. The county covers 83% of the total health care costs for all employees. The employee share is the remaining 17%.
So could we go back to that?
Sure.
So based on the new scale that we have, how will employees fall in that?
That's going to be something that Sam's going to cover in detail. She's up
Okay.
next. But just in general, what we're saying here is that 11.5 increase to our total salary costs.
Okay.
And that depending on your years of service and what your salary currently is, will depend on where you fall and what your percent increase will be individually.
Okay,
But
thank you.
everyone will get that 2% COLA. Okay? The 2023 budget also includes a few new funds. We have a Juvenile Justice Preservation Fund, and that can be found on page 308. The Opioid Abatement and Treatment Fund is on page 311. And a local area tribal consistency fund is due up at the 11/14 council meeting. And as you all know, we have continuing challenges. We're dependent on sales tax. That's a given for the general fund. 65% of the general fund revenue is sales tax. Current revenue climate is favorable but cannot be assumed to be permanent. That's where you'll notice in the past years we've only forecasted a 2% increase. Not knowing what was going to happen in the last few years, we budgeted on the conservative side. We've been lucky that things in St. Charles County have been favorable and we've been able to bring in the revenue that we needed. Based on that, we're going to continue to budget conservatively. Our capital projects fund remains underfunded for the near term. Then taken into consideration are the inflationary trends. We're not sure where things are going to go. Right now, they're saying that inflation may be starting to go down, but we're kind of at the market's mercy right now. Employment market. You see that different companies are starting to have layoffs, but you still see a lot of movement of employees from job to job. And we're just not sure where things are going to fall.
We have a fairly high percentage of vacancies too, still, right?
I think so.
So do you have any, or maybe Sam would know what the outlook is maybe for next year, if we think that's going to change, or we're still going to be having those issues with getting good employees?
Well, we're hoping the pay plan will address a lot of that too. But one of the things that we like to drive home is that the county does have extremely good benefits.
For sure.
All right, and next up is HR. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Tracy.
Good afternoon.
Hello.
All right. Okay, so I wanted to start with the 2023 FTE additions and deletions. The big takeaway for the 2023 general fund budget are that there are no additional FTEs being added. As you can see, when you take into consideration the positions that are being deleted, we come out ahead. We're actually down 4.2. In addition to that, there are 27.5 FTEs that are going to be defunded. In our other funds, you can see that the new employee positions are going up 15.6 after you take into consideration the deleted funds, or deleted positions, and the defunded positions are at 5. All of this information should be in your packet. I'll go into detail on what's being added, what's being deleted, and what positions are actually being defunded. Okay. So now I want to go into all the fun stuff, looking at the county's compensation and what the impact of today's economy has had on our compensation plan. In 2021, we completed a full 3-year cycle. If you're all familiar, if you remember, the county does a 3-year cycle. So we have 400 job classifications, and we have 1,000 job descriptions that go along with that. So in 2021, we completed a full 3 years. So we've already done year 1, year 2, and last year was year 3. And starting for 2022, we should be starting year 1, starting all over again. Unfortunately, with the changes in the market, we kind of had to look at things a little bit differently, so I'll go into that a little bit more later. But right now, I want to start with why the economy is so different. And I know Tracy touched on it a little bit, but I'm going to go into more detail on that. The big obvious change was COVID. COVID had a massive impact on our economy and the job market as a whole. We saw in 2021, 3.6 million Americans left the workforce. 90% of them were baby boomers. And right now, if you don't know, baby boomers made up the massive amount of our workforce. With them leaving, that leaves Gen X and millennials to take their place. Gen X is not a large group. They do have the skills necessary to take over those positions, but there's not a lot of them going around. Millennials are in the workforce, they're new to the workforce, and they don't have those knowledge, skills, and abilities to take over the positions. So this is coming to a job seekers market. What you're seeing is that candidates can ask for top dollar with little to no experience. And in order for us to get them in the door, we have to pay that kind of money. In addition to a lack of candidates, compression has become a massive issue with the county. A lack of consistent revenue coming in means that we're not able to give those merit increases necessary to move employees through the pay grades. In addition to that, we're paying these candidates top dollar to get them in the door, so they're backing up against employees that have been with us for some time that are simply not moving through the pay grades. So seeing this impact of COVID on the economy, the lack of valuable candidates, and the increasing requests for advanced starting salaries, back in April, HR decided to take a look at those three-year group of positions again. Remember, we just finished our 3 years, and so we should be starting again. But in April, we were like, why don't we see what this what kind of impact this market has had on our 3-year group? So unfortunately, what we saw was cause for alarm. With any job position within their market, it should take roughly 3 years for them to start lagging in their market, and that's why we do a 3-year cycle. But what we saw within 5 months is those positions were lagging quite a bit. So after noticing that, we decided to look at all 1,000 of our job descriptions, all 400 job classifications, and seeing what happens to them, what's going on with them in the job market. And what we found is that they were all lagging considerably. So we decided to throw out the 3-year plan and analyze everything and start from scratch. It's only temporary, we're doing it this year, but next year we'll go back to the 3-year cycle like we've been doing. But this year we thought it was important, given what's happening in the market, to really take a look at all of our positions. So based off of that, this is what HR is recommending. Adopt a new pay schedule consisting of a total of 20 pay grades with a shorter range spread. Right now we have 31 pay grades. Increase lowest minimum salary from $12.89 per hour to $15.54 per hour. So basically what that meant was all of your pay band A positions, they had to be moved up because we got rid of those pay band A's. So we had to create a whole new pay schedule that consists of new positions, or placing the new positions in these new pay bands with the lowest minimum pay at $15.54 an hour. And take a lead approach when looking at these positions. If you remember, whenever we look at the market, we always look at 50% of the market because we didn't want to be the leader, but we also didn't want to fall behind. Now we're suggesting taking a more of an aggressive approach. We still won't be the leader, but we won't be in the middle anymore. We'll be more on the high end of the 60% mark. And then look at employees. So you had asked where we were putting these employees. So what we're looking at is their years of service. We put into assumption that everyone gets a 2% increase. So if they hadn't gotten that 2% increase, what would it look like if we now applied that 2% increase? From the time they started with the county to now, where would they actually be? And then that's where we placed them in the pay grades. If their pay currently is higher than what it would be with years of service, then we went with current pay. If it's higher with years of service, they went with years of service. Oops, what did I do? Okay. In addition to that, since we were looking at these positions, these pay grades in 2022 and where they should have been in 2022, we then applied a 2% increase, a 2% COLA on top of that, and that's that 2% that Tracy was talking about. And that'll help them get through the pay grade, but also encompasses that increase for 2023. So what we are proposing is that we consider that every year moving forward, is that we look at giving a 2% increase minimum so that we can keep pushing our employees through the pay grades and we don't have these compression issues moving forward. So what we think this will do, obviously we think it's going to retain employees because even if they don't get a years of service, they're still going to get that 2% increase. It'll help with recruiting because we're getting rid of those non-livable wages and we're at least starting at $15.54 an hour for the minimum. And it will help with compression because we are moving employees through the pay grades. Do you have any questions about this?
I just want to remind the council too that as they went through each of those job descriptions, they studied that job description for how it fit. So if it looked like in the old series, it might just convert from a 204 to a E whatever. They didn't just assume that. They went in and looked, who's who's paying what, who's, doing this job based on the credentials and the requirements of the job, and how does that compare? So it wasn't just a matter of there was any assumption that it was automatically moving. They studied each one of them. So some of them went a couple ranges higher, some of them stayed close to where they were.
But no one went down.
Now, was this all done in-house, or did you go outside to get some ideas about this new pay plan? Because it's, it's a big change.
It was all done in-house. We used pay factors to help us out. We also benchmarked. We asked municipalities around us what they were paying and that sort of thing. So it was actually, Paul and I, we did all the changes.
That was a lot of work.
It was a lot of work, yes.
A lot of weekends.
Yes.
So, Sam, we're going to go from 31 pay ranges to 20? Is
To
that what
20,
you said?
that is correct.
So are we going to get a breakdown of kind of how that breaks out for different positions?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are we going through that tonight, or is that to be determined?
I think that's in the future. We will
Gotcha.
do that, yeah.
Okay.
So, Sam, are you talking about, what we've had so many discussions on is, on a sliding scale, where those folks end up, it's arbitrary. So from what I understand, when we had our couple meetings, it's gonna be whatever that sliding scale is, it's gonna be like whatever, maybe 5 years of service, 10 years, 15, 20, 25, 30. And so it'll hit that spot regardless of whatever some opinions may be of the employer, whatever, that's how it's gonna be set, right?
Yes, it's by a formula. So everyone who's at 10 years, as long as they haven't had an advanced starting salary, would see themselves at that 10-year mark.
Okay. I think what Mike's asking, what I'm curious is, do you lay that out for us today, or is that another conversation, or what?
That's a future meeting.
Yes.
Future? Okay.
Do we have an idea? I know one of the things we talked about before is an employee starts and they have no idea what time frame they should top out at their pay range. Is the hope here that we're going to be able to tell your employee, hey, if you're a 208, you should be through this pay range within X amount of years?
As long as we do have that consistent merit increases throughout the years of at least a 2%, then we could do that. But we
Okay.
have to have that at least.
Okay,
But
And
our
then-
ranges are still very broad.
right.
And so
Well, I
it's
would
not
figure if you're
going to
gonna go
be
from 31 to
5 or
20.
7 or,
I
yeah.
wouldn't see the pay range, if you're gonna go from 31 to 20, that's why I was asking, I would expect the pay range to widen rather than narrow, but you're saying it's going to narrow, not widen.
Right, in some cases,
So
yes.
you're compressing a 31 number into 20, so I'm curious to see how you're gonna narrow that to make that work, but I understand the employees have always had a frustration of, I've been here 25 years and I'm still not the top of my
Right.
pay range.
Correct.
Which I understand if you got promoted and you moved through a couple of different pay range, you came in at a 203 and you're now at a 208, hot damn, you've been a really great employee and we've promoted you 5 times, but I understand expectations and managing that, so. At what point in the presentation are we gonna talk about pay increases for employees next year, or was that 11.5 it?
Normally, that's in your December ordinance. The PAP ordinance in December, it lays out the pay ranges
Okay,
and the,
But Mike, one of the things about this is we have a pool of money that equates to an 11.5% increase on our payroll that is going to be allocated largely to the longer tenured employees of this county. So somebody who's been here 20 years, regardless of the fact if they've been promoted a couple of times and they're in a higher pay range now than what they were when they started here, the pay range that they're in right now is going to be moved out to the 20-year mark in that range. So people are going to get some appreciable raises, but it's not going to be an across-the-board
Right.
pay raise this year. Some people will get 2%, which is the minimum. It's people who are lesser tenured, who came in at advanced starting salary, they'll get the 2%. But people who have been here longer, and that was the aim of this, and this is what we talked about going back to last year, was the fact that we wanted to recognize tenure with the county. not necessarily time in the job they have, but tenure with the county. And that's why you're seeing a bump in total compensation of 11.5%. So when you want to talk about job descriptions, you'll get the new pay ranges for each of the different pay bands, where, you know, where the minimum, the midpoint, and the maximum is.
Okay.
But you're not really going to see individual payroll information, because it's going to vary from employee to employee depending upon exactly how long they've been here and the job that they hold.
Good question.
What do you think the average is gonna be, though? Do you have any idea?
We haven't calculated that, honestly. I mean, this work has started, and Joanne mentioned this a little while ago. Sam and Paul Hunt, and maybe others in the HR department, have been working on this since last spring.
Yeah.
And we are talking about monster spreadsheets that basically have to be done manually. And I don't know, how many versions of the spreadsheet did you do?
Quite a few.
And weekends, yes, but hundreds and hundreds of hours went into this. We met with council members on this back in, August, I guess, something like that, to give you an overview and what the premise was going to be and how we were going to move forward for the budget.
Well,
So,
this seems different from what we talked about, because it seemed like to me it was gonna be average close to 10%. Because with a 2% cost of living, that's not fair.
Well, it's exactly what we talked about.
right.
We haven't changed a single thing since we talked to you all. But I will tell you that it's almost impossible to give you like an average, because if you have an employee who, maybe under the last study that we had done with Evergreen, who was here 15 years, and for some reason, when Sam went in, she's looking at where they should be, and they're like at year 8. And, you know, that's X number of years ago now. They're gonna go nearly to the top because of the years of service they have with us. Somebody else who we may have hired into a department at an advanced starting salary and has been here 3 or 4 years may be close to where exactly they should be, based on their years of service. And they're not gonna get a lot more than the 2%. So it's very difficult. This plan does what you all talked to us about last year, which is it favors getting away from compression and giving the years of service to our employees. So, and it's years of service purely because it's impossible to trace on the 1,000 employees we have at what stage they were promoted or at what stage they changed jobs. So basically, whatever position they're in, they're going to their years of service. And then the new things that we changed last year, if you remember, so in certain of the higher pay ranges, they get a 14% for being promoted, and others, they get 8,
Yeah, 10.
10. So those rules will then apply for future promotions.
Well, do the employees know where they're gonna fall into that new category yet?
They never know where they're gonna fall until they get their letter after you all pass the budget and the PAP.
That'll be
Madam Chairman?
latter
I
part of
don't know why
latter
we're being so
December.
secretive about it. I think we should let them know as soon as possible so that they get an idea if that's,
Well, Dave,
Works
you
for
passed the
'em.
budget, and we can let them know. That's
Yeah,
the
but-
way the system always has worked.
yeah, but how are we gonna know if they're unhappy if we pass the budget?
Well, you're gonna have some people who are absolutely delighted, a lot of people who've been long-term employees of the county who are absolutely delighted, and some newer employees who won't be so delighted.
Yeah.
I guess I'll take a look at the numbers again.
Madam
I
Chair?
think, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Mr.
I think Terry was trying to
Oh,
talk.
Chair, were you next? I'm sorry, I can't.
go ahead.
Yeah.
Hey, Bob, I mean, I'm looking at the budget message, and it says, you know, revenues are expected to grow maybe 5.8%, okay? I'm looking at this up here, and that's a 20% increase in the minimum starting salary. And you just threw out 11.5% across the board, okay, for tenured employees, I guess, or employees for a while. And I'm looking at stuff like in tonight's consent agenda, the bid for trucks was budgeted 120, and we're spending 180 because trucks have gone up so much, okay? You gonna make this all work financially within the constraints of that budget?
I'll, in conjunction with the acting director of finance back here, I think I can answer that, yes, we believe we can. And this is a big step. I've been between up there and back and down here, I've been around here for like 26 years, and I do not remember a double-digit increase across, that would equate to a double-digit increase in payroll since I came to the council in 1995. This is a big step, and it's a step we've been talking about, as I mentioned, since early spring. And obviously watching sales tax numbers and revenues, and, there are a lot of variables to that. But this is a big step, but it's a step that the county executive thinks we need to take in order to get our employees to the relevant part in their pay range that's measured by the years of service they have with the county. And so, yes, it's a big step, and we're prepared to go forward with it at this point.
Terry,
Nancy.
did you want to say?
No, go ahead, Joe.
Sam, one of the problems that we've had in years past is the fact that if you're a team foreman on highways, and then you get moved to a riding ball superintendent, or you're a sergeant and you get moved to a lieutenant, and you're at the year 25 and then you get the promotion, and at the year 25 you're at one of the higher points of the range, then you get moved to that promotion and you drop down where you're making just a little bit more or equal. I think that's part of the formula that really needs to be fixed. And so what I agree with Dave. I mean, I think what you guys did is great. I know it's been a lot of work, and we've needed this for a long time. But I would like to have it explained to us how, if a guy gets a promotion because he's done a good job, and he's at 25 years of service and he moves to lieutenant, like we had that lieutenant captain thing a couple of years ago, me and Mr. Cronin were trying to get straightened up. But if they're at 25 years service at 80% of the scale, or however you're doing it, to 80%, and he moves over to that promotion, they should be at 80% at that position, and they shouldn't drop down where they're equal or below the job they were taking with more responsibility. So I hope that you can show us if there's a formula, or if it's in by ordinance, or how that is being corrected.
That is actually already in the ordinance, and that's that 14% increase or 10% increase that they get.
So does it equal it out though? Like if someone were to take that position, they're gonna be at 25 years of service in that position?
Not necessarily, no. It's just a flat 14% or the minimum of the range, whichever's higher. I don't know, I mean,
We could run some
Yeah.
examples, though, to show you how it is a significant effect
But
on
to-
what the problem was before.
To his example, my understanding would be, to use your example of going from sergeant to lieutenant, since we have so many people with badges and guns here, not that they're interested in this discussion at all, but let's just say, for example, if you move to that, your range at sergeant is much lower than your range as lieutenant, I would assume. Am I correct in my thinking there? So if you're going to move, you're going to get that raise, first of all, but you're not going to top out for a while now, so you have growth potential now to where before, as sergeant, you probably did not.
Right.
So if you're almost topping out at that sergeant range, it makes lieutenant a whole lot more attractive to where it may not have been more attractive before. So I think that's where the growth potential comes in there. Because one of the things that we were concerned about with the idea about, if you have 25 years and we move you to the top end of your service, and to use that example, you were top end sergeant, you got promoted to lieutenant, all of a sudden I move you top end lieutenant, you got no growth. And I would hope if we promoted you to lieutenant, you're going to stay there for a while. Well, that guarantees you all you're going to get is cost of living for the rest of the time that you're here until you make captain. And then you're going to have the exact same thing. So you're going to have one good year the rest of the time that you're here. Otherwise, you're getting that cost of living increase. So I think the whole thing was to allow everybody to have growth potential as you continue to go, because you were saying that the most unhappy employees when it came raise time were the people who were at the top of their scale, and they weren't getting anything else.
that's
So
correct, yes.
hopefully with this, it's going to move people through faster, which we had talked about. It'll make them a little happier from that standpoint. But hopefully, this helps us with the retention
Yes.
problem, because it seems like lately, and I would thank Chief for doing a great job of fighting for his people, but I would say he created this problem at his old job at the old city. When you start bumping up, Winsfield jumps up, and then O'Fallon jumps up, and then St. Peter's jumps up, and all of a sudden, we're back in the same boat again, where we're always playing catch-up. So hopefully with this, we're going to retain a little better, and we won't have as many openings to recruit to fill.
That's what we're hoping, and that's also why we're saying we should do a more aggressive lead approach with the 60% to market versus the 50% that we've done in the past.
Good. All right.
Before we pass this, I would like to see the formula, and I think most of these folks would too. So if you are a old position, one of the 31 pay grades, and this is where you're at, I think if you're an employee of the county, you want to know what your new pay grade is. And you want to know what your years of service factor is, so you can see what your pay was going to be this year versus your pay is going to be next year. I think not only do we owe that to the existing employees, I think that's a hell of a recruiting tool for a new employee too. Say, look, if I stay here so long, I'm going to get this. So-
And they do see that when we send out the letter saying this is where you were, this is where you are, this is the old pay grade you were in, this is the new pay grade you're
But
in.
will we have that access to that data prior to the passing the budget? Or
Yeah,
the formula?
You'll have the new pay grades and the classifications that fit within them.
Okay.
And that gets introduced at the same time that the PAP does.
Terry, I think, has been wanting to make a
That's not-
comment.
You know, again, I think that the concept of rewarding people that have been here the longest is very commendable, okay? You mentioned at the beginning of your presentation there that we are overpaying some people just to get them started, just because we have to fill positions and we're overpaying those people. And I understand that, but I think if there's going to be some folks that might be, you know, somewhat left out on this, it needs to be those folks and not the people that have been here for 25 years or 20 years. You know, those are the people that I think we need to really reward as best we can.
Yep, and that's what we're aiming for.
Okay.
You know, one more point, and Sam, I appreciate what you did, but I think I think Dave and Joe are saying, that I'm kind of in agreement, is you're kind of asking us to pass a budget, and then we'll see what happens. And I don't know, it seems to me that you would want to, at least, I would want to see, we don't have to see names or nothing, I just want to see how that's going to, these promotions are going to work. I'm not going to just vote for something because you're telling me it and take my word for it and believe us, which, I just want to see it
And
have some-
Councilman, we're not asking you to. I mean, this is just like an overview tonight for you to ask
No,
questions.
I understand, but David
And we'll
asked
come
the
up-
question, and he said you'll see it when that letter goes out after it's passed.
No,
Well,
the
the individual
employee will.
employees will see it.
Yeah.
I know, but I think what I'm saying is I'd like to know exactly what is, and I know you guys did a lot of work, I'm not criticizing, I just like to know exactly how the formula is gonna work when they get a promotion and how that person's gonna end up, because I do know that when last year, me and Mr. Cronin tried to, and I'm not bringing up, throwing salt on the wound, but there were some lieutenants making more than the captains, and I know that this is what we're trying to correct, some of these issues, but I would like to know how that's gonna be corrected, so we know exactly what we're agreeing as a council, that, yeah, this sounds great. I mean, you guys did a great job. Just like to know, or maybe we would say, can we just tweak it a little bit this way, or maybe it should look like this. That's our job up here, is to know exactly what we're voting for. So that's, all I'd like to see is kind of an idea of how that formula is gonna work.
And then last year, if you remember right, the ladies here did a pay study for sergeants in the police department compared to other sergeants in the area based on post-dispatch numbers, which are pretty close. And it was pretty apparent that the sergeants were getting pretty well underpaid. So we didn't get anything accomplished with that last year, but I'd like to know from this new formula, what's a sergeant with 5 or 10 years going to be paid in the police department compared to what he was? Because I know last year at this time, they weren't getting paid comparable to others, because you guys' pay study threw in City of St. Louis and Crestwood and some stuff like that, where we just looked at O'Fallon, St. Peter, St. Charles, and Winsville.
Right,
So-
and you guys looked at individual salaries. We weren't looking at individual salaries at that time.
Well, I just want to see, when we looked at it, it was, I want to say off the top of my head, it was close to 20% less than the average. So that's what we were concerned about. So I'd like to know that again. So I don't, this is my last shot to try to get that fixed, so.
Yeah, I've gone through the entire budget already, and there's just a couple minor things that I have questions about, but this is the most important thing to me, is that we're going to take care of our employees this year. So I want to make sure that happens, and especially with the revenue that we had in. So I want to see those numbers, and I want to see them before I vote on them. And I'd like the employees to see those numbers before that, so that they know what's happening. I mean, they might be thinking about leaving and see what they're going to be making, and it might change their mind. So I think it's important that we get that out to the employees. Shouldn't be a big secret, because you know we're going to pass the budget.
I don't know what else to say. Okay, all right. Well, we have more of these meetings coming up before we pass the budget, and so, given the fact that there have been some questions here, maybe we could either go back over this, or you could add some further detail that would help everybody understand exactly what this is going to consist of. Okay, all right, thank you very
All right,
much.
thank you.
Thanks for all your hard work.
Yeah, thank you.
So I think, John, you're up.
Have a couple slides on the Parks Department, kind of a big picture overview of the revenues, their expenses, some major capital projects, and then we want to talk about the airport and its relationship with potentially the Parks Department. So park budget, Parks Department is starting the 23 calendar year with $14,766,755 in predicted ending fund balance. That's primarily projects that were planned for this year that just didn't get done. Kinetic Park being one of those projects that, or a capital improvement that just didn't get completed, so it's being carried over into the 23 year. Revenues for the Parks Department comes from three sources, the biggest being a use tax that get dedicated for parks and recreation. The second is a Metro Parks tax, it's a 1/10 sales tax. And the third is grant and fees, so for camping and those activities, we do charge a fee. For a total, that brings it about $23 million in revenues into the Parks Department annually. Expenses consist of three major items: personnel, which is about $6.6 million, that basically pay for the parks employee; operating costs, that's fuel, water, electric, those type of things, $3.8 million throughout our park system; and then capital being the biggest item of nearly $24 million worth of capital improvements. I think a big picture here is that if use tax, which is not quite as consistent as sales tax, use tax is really generated by business spending, so it's a little more high and low. We're able to, if we see the use tax not coming in as expected, throttle down that capital, which is a major piece of it. So we're not in danger of having to lay off park employees or have to shut down operations. It's really how much, what can we do on the capital on those major projects should we see a downturn in the use tax in that business spending. Major capital items included in the 2023 budget is Kinetic Park. A lot of that work was anticipated to occur this year. Due to kind of some inflation that we saw, we postponed that project, hoping to get better bids in 23 than what we saw on some of the items that we bid out in 22 this year. The other park that we're looking at some investment is New Melly. That's a project that we also talked about last year. Again, we kind of throttled back as we saw inflation come into this year. Klondike Park, $2.9 million. Part of that's with a playground and some additional amenities out there in the Augusta area. Quail Ridge, Blue Ways, and the last piece of this you'll see is airport, and that's one of the things on the last slide we want to talk to council about it. The airport, what we're proposing in this budget is that the airport would move from the county highway department. Currently, the airport is kind of a department, it's its own fund, but the airport manager or director reports through the highway department. So we would take that fund and combine it into the Parks Department and create basically a new county park for those that enjoy aviation and those activities. As we know, the airport in St. Charles County does not serve jets. We have a limited runway, so it really is for that recreational or hobbyist pilots and planes. And so having it be considered a county park or managed as a county park makes a lot of sense from that aspect. It's providing that recreation and entertainment value for the residents of St. Charles County. The airport, showing where its revenues and expenses are, in summary, is that hangar rentals, so that's the T hangars, as well as some of the larger hangars that we have out at the airport, bring the majority of the revenues, $321,000. The fuel pump use fee, which I appreciate the council increasing at its last meeting from 5 cents to 8. You'll see even with, at 5 cents, it's a small amount of money. It's $3,600. So having it increase to 8 cents will be a small bump into the revenues. There's a farm lease, there's a lease for Boeing, and then there's some general miscellaneous revenues, bringing their total budget just shy of $400,000, $395,838. Their expenses basically consist of 2 personnel and operating costs, bringing their total operating costs about $356,674, and that's in 2001. That was their actual numbers. So the airport in general makes a little bit of money. But what the problem they have is that, and especially in this coming year of 2023, is that there's a lot of federal grant money out there for infrastructure, and they need to have a match for that, a 10% match. So they applied for a grant of $880,000. Well, a 10% match is, will be $88,000, 10% of $880,000. Well, if you look at just from the revenue and operations side, they don't have the money to cover the grant. And under the highway department can't provide them assistance because that tax is dedicated for road and bridge repairs. Well, the Parks Department, under a recreational facility like this, would be able to help them with that grant match. And as you look in the future of, is our goal just to operate the airport or make it better over time? Well, we can make it better if we continue to do some investment, but also if we can match the grants that are available so that we get more bang for our dollars. And so that's really the goal of moving the airport underneath the Parks Department, is to look at that long-term future of the airport and how can we, what's the strategy to make it basically the best facility they can be and provide those educational and aviation opportunities to the residents of St. Charles County. So we believe moving it to the Parks Department provides that long-term stability and allows the management team at the airport to continue to apply for and seek and hopefully secure grants to keep that facility in good shape. Any questions on parks?
John was kind enough to give me a call about this, and ever since we talked a week or so ago, I've been kicking this around, and I can't find a single negative to what you're proposing. Everything's positive. You've got to realize that the 2 people that run the airport, okay, are both older, and they're not going to be there forever. And by doing this, you're going to have multiple younger people in Parks Department that can learn how to take care of the runways, do the things they have to do. Additionally, they had access to parks marketing. That airport is a little gem of an airport, and by a little bit more marketing, maybe you might see a lot more turnout yet than we have now. The Halloween event that they had there at the open house, I was there with my grandson. It was a very nice event, well attended by not just aviation, but people are interested in the police helicopter, the air helicopters, all the different things. So I think it's a real positive, and I think I can't see anything bad about it. And I would say the next thing to do is start working on a family arena. You knew that was coming.
Yeah. And I think it makes a lot of sense too, because if you look at the airport manager, we really hire an airport manager to know the FAA regulations. We hire an airport manager to provide professional management of the facility and also the secure grants. Well, because it currently is an island of 2 people, at certain times of the year, he's out there mowing grass. And that's needed to get the airport operational. But the Parks Department has a lot of folks that can help manage the grass and do that in a way that's more cost effective. Do you want someone that's basically making a higher salary out there on a mower? well, that's not really a good use of his time. His time should be focused on how to make the airport safer, how to promote that facility, how to make it the best facility it can. So by this move, we're allowing that island to have a little more resources underneath it to be able to call for, some of the people that are better at maintenance and those activities that, so the airport manager can focus on those key duties.
And then matching money is, Bob, when we built that last hangar, the last new hangar out there, I'm going to say that it was something like 10% county and 90% of
That's right.
MoDOT money. So, I mean, when we did that, I remember that was right after I first came on the council. I said, this is a no-brainer. I mean, you can build it for only 10% of your money is going in, yet you're collecting all the revenues that are coming in from the hangars. And I know in the past that I don't have a hangar there anymore, but from past, those hangars were always full. I mean, there was no vacancy whatsoever. You got in a waiting list to get in a hangar at county. So I think it's important. I think it's going to give you a lot of opportunity. And the other thing is, remember that airport was originally a training airport for Navy pilots in World War II. And the federal government still has the ability to do that again if they need to. So it's also, I think, important for our national defense with Boeing being there as well and having an airport that could serve as a training facility again. So I think it's a great move, John. I know you put a lot of effort into it.
Joe, a lot of these grants have to do with taxiway improvements and runway improvements that overhaul the concrete, the lighting systems, those sorts of things that we would otherwise have to pay for. So getting that 80% or 90% funding is in that category of a no-brainer. The other thing is that because the airport, some of the conditions of these grants is the fact that we have to keep the airport running for a period of 20 years. So if we just decide to pull the plug on the airport and cease operations, we're on the hook for some of that grant money we received to do some of these projects. Doesn't do the citizens of this county any good to shut the airport down. It's a viable entity and it's very active, and I agree wholeheartedly with your statement about it being a gem. And I think that the residents of the county see that as well. So a move like this helps establish long-term stability for the airport and increases the likelihood of us getting additional funding in the future.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Makes sense.
Madam Chair, may I just ask for your indulgence for a moment? Because I know he can't stay forever, but Mike Hurlbert wanted to join us briefly to tell the council about tonight.
So good to see you here.
Mike was really
Yeah.
hoping that we would make a big deal about him being here. Hey, welcome back, man. It's great to see you.
Good to see you.
Yeah. You were missed. So, yeah.
Sorry, nobody wants to come to this podium after I've been here.
I know.
Coughing on a Monday,
Joanne.
sorry.
Could have zoomed you in or something. I'm just kidding.
So we wanted to talk briefly about a new fund that's going to be in the budget, starting with '23. So as you well remember, the county brought suit against the opioid manufacturers and distributors. And as a result of that suit, some of the distributors have in fact now settled. So in conjunction with the Missouri Attorney General's office, we were part of that nationwide settlement. The funds under the settlement are required to be used for opioid-related issues and to treat opioid addiction. So the '23 budget sets up a new fund to receive the settlement funds, which are supposed to average about $950,000 annually for 18 years. So what we've looked at doing with those funds fall into a few categories. First is in corrections. About 48% of the inmates who come into corrections have opioid addictions or opioid and multiple other drugs. This would provide for the first time for us to have a substance abuse staffer and some peer counselors to work to get the inmates into some level of treatment before they leave us and to hand them off into treatment, hopefully avoiding recidivism. The second thing that we want to do with some of the money is to provide some assistance to all the police departments through a contract with a community provider. The officers, as we understand it, frequently encounter people who are addicted and suicidal, or are addicted and mentally ill. And we want to have a contract so that in the field, they can call for assistance if they need assistance, and have somebody help them get that person into treatment. I think that will, from my discussions with the chief, should be helpful. And it's for all the police departments, not just for ours. Then the final sort of broader category is, a small category. As you know, the prosecutor has done a CRUSH initiative for many years where he works with kids in the junior highs and the high schools. And he had to get out of that for a while because the source of funding he had for it went away. This would double the amount he had for that and also give us some money to expand that beyond the numbers and the groups of kids that he was originally serving. But it also then would give us a fairly significant amount of money through, whether it's court initiative or whether it would be through community providers, to work with some of the high-risk groups of people, pregnant women, children who are born addicted, and others in the community for whom, there's been no source of funds in the past. So you'll see this in the budget.
Questions?
No? Sounds good.
I just think we should acknowledge and congratulate our county counselor's office. It's my understanding that they played a large role in getting this thing settled
They did.
and getting us the funds that we're going to receive from that.
They absolutely do.
Way to go, Roy. And your staff?
Mr. Schnurr.
Bringing it home.
I have one slide.
Really?
And it'll only take an hour and a half to get through.
But we wanted to provide you with an update on the ARPA program. You know, this has been going on now for better part of 2 years. And our total award, as you know, is $78 million. 2 installments of $39 million apiece, one last year, one this year. So over the course of time, you know, we in the '22 budget, we set a budget for the first tranche of funding of $39 million. And now that we have all $78 million, and now that we have final guidance from the feds, we did not have that guidance last year when we passed the '22 budget. We got down in the weeds and have clarified the regulations and have taken this one-time money, and we are dedicating the vast majority of this to one-time purposes that benefit the citizens of this county. Biggest thing is the jail modification with the mental health unit and the overhaul of the kitchen. Those 2 facets of the jail project are needed, and we've slated that for $25 million. And what you see on this screen is the total menu of projects that we have before the U.S. Treasury right now as being our ARPA program. There's nothing missing from this list right now. The ESCO project, you should be well familiar with that. The energy saving projects for different buildings around the county, dedicated at $23 million, the $10 million for the slab replacement. That's underway with the highway department. They got started with that this year. I think just ballparking numbers, I think they may get around $3 million of that work done because concrete companies and paving companies had their work set for the year last spring. So we were able to get some of that work done. The remainder of it is moving forward into 2023 and part of the '23 budget. The Highway Department also has a new initiative on stormwater inspection, where we have 3 people who are going to be manning or dedicated to the effort of along with 2 specialized trucks for sewer inspection, sewer clean out, storm sewer. That program is just getting started. One piece of equipment is here, and I think the second one is about to arrive, I think.
And I just want to make sure, we have reported that that program has started. So one of the initiatives that Councilman Hammond asked us to get going as quickly as we could, so we are utilizing the existing trucks that I have. And throughout this whole summer on Fridays, they've been doing that inspection work. And they will continue to inspect those lines and determine, hopefully, where there's problems, be more proactive versus reactive where we've been in the past.
Yeah. School resource officers was one that came along during the early summer, and we have made that happen. There are 14 school resource officers as part of this program, and this total also includes the equipment and cars that are needed for those 14 officers. We have premium overtime in 2 areas where we are having a hard time staffing. That's corrections and dispatch. So ARPA there's a provision in ARPA to allow for a premium to be paid on the overtime rate so that we can continue to keep things staffed. $4.5 million, the biggest portion of that are the $2.1 million each, one for DDRB and one for CCRB. They are in the process right now. We had some meetings and discussions over the past week or so. They've been soliciting applications, and we should see some mobilization of those funds in early 2023. The remaining $300,000 of that was dedicated to veterans groups. And we had a pretty good response from that also, and I've still got a couple of applications out there right now we've spent about half, slightly more than half of the funds of the $300,000 with some other applications to go. Law enforcement initiative is the RIC and some other measures to help fight crime here in St. Charles County. And the RIC, obviously, I think you're all familiar with the RIC operation where we have some officers dedicated through these funds that will be working over there. The other items here, the monitoring and compliance are the administrative dollars for this managing the ARPA program over the course of through the end of 2026, and also a position in community development as program coordinator. $3.25 million is slated for the family arena with infrastructure type things like the roof and the parking lot. Not the cosmetic bells and whistles of the arena, but keeping the structure intact because that is a primary go-to spot for disaster relief and reaction to weather emergencies, tornadoes, that sort of thing. We've had that happen when the pandemic happened. Obviously, we were pretty active over there with vaccinations and all of that and testing. So and the last item is the animal control staffing. There's a large surge in animals being brought back into the adoption process and being dropped off in animal control because during the pandemic, people, while they were shut in, people bought pets, and now that life is beginning to get back to normal, the pets are being dropped off different places. So that's the complete rundown of the ARPA program. It accounts for the full $78 million. And be happy to answer any questions that you've got on that.
Can I ask you a question about the jail?
Yeah.
So we did the bridgeway across to the courthouse, and we're doing this. When we originally looked at remodeling the jail, we were looking at around $93 million.
Right.
So we're kind of piecemealing it together. Do you have an idea of where this is going to leave us in terms of what do we still need to do cost-wise?
I don't. Christine Ramsdale might want to speak to that.
Sorry, Christine.
She's the nuts and bolts of this program. But, when we did the CARES Act money with the Cross Bridge, we also did the overhaul of the booking area.
Right.
Those were the two big things that we did there. So Christine?
Well, I know we had the main thing where we don't have an elevator that goes to every floor.
Correct.
And like, if you're on the second floor and there's a fight on the fifth floor, by the time you get there, it's going to be done.
Right.
So we were talking about trying to redo all of that.
So we've gone back and forth. I'm grateful we did the feasibility study because it has actually allowed us a tool to be able to go back and look at kind of piecemealing some of this stuff, carving out some of those costs, also updating some of those costs because, for example, a housing unit, just a plug number on a housing unit was $650 a square foot. It is no longer that. It is double that. So COVID did a lot to increase the pricing of something like that. Now, we're all hoping that it levels out, and it will, but that tool has allowed us to kind of peel out. We know the booking has happened. We know certain elements about the booking expanded, changed some of the direction that we were originally going because we were planning on vacating first floor and second floor. We're no longer going to vacate second floor because it's an integral place to house during that transition of coming in and being committed and then rolling back out and being moved up to other floors to serve their time or wait through their trials. So with this, we know that we're going to kind of take a piece of that pie. It's not as clearly defined that it's still $95 million for the overall project. We've done the booking. Booking happened to be twice the size of what we anticipated it to be because of COVID. We needed to expand that to create social distancing, to create quarantine units, to be able to house things differently because the operations are different now. So we still have the ability to go through and modify the third floor. We're sort of saving that tower environment for the growth of other housing units to take care of some of that issue that we have with the second floor not reaching all the way up to the fifth floor. We will be able to accommodate that and create an elevator shaft, though we don't need the elevator just yet, but we're continuing to move operations up. So that will allow us to have a second floor elevator that will go up to the third floor. There's not a fourth floor, it goes up to the fifth floor. So we will kind of modify that to a degree, but we're still planning for the future to allow us to come back to eventually build that tower, to eventually have that communal shaft that will go through all floors. So we're keeping an eye on the future with that, but we don't have an exact definitive. It's 95 million. We've deducted this much for the booking project. We're going to deduct this much for that, but we're keeping an eye on it. We know what we still have left to do, and we're going to update that when we have a better idea of where the cost comes out for this next phase of a project. We'll be able to get a better idea of what the cost is and be able to update that. Still cheaper than building new.
How long are we expecting the modification to take with this 25 million?
My estimation is going to be 2.5 to 3 years.
Okay, so it's still going to, okay.
And if we try to speed it up, which we will try to speed it up as best we can, but sometimes you pay a premium for doing it in a shorter period of time, and that's something I don't want to do. I want to balance that out. The time and cost is always a factor when you're doing projects.
Councilman, can I also clarify that this 25 million is available for renovations under ARPA because we have such a high incidence of people with substance abuse and alcoholism disorders. About 68% of the place overall has one or the other if we look at our population. So that allows us to use the ARPA funds to do that. Otherwise, we'd have to come up. But what we can't do is take that kitchen off the third floor. And so that's what the money that would be bonded would pay for the new kitchen. That would then let us renovate about just over 40% of the third floor into direct units and a small kind of critical care mental health area. So that hopefully would take the urgency off our back because we don't have $100 million
Right.
in general funds to go do something like build the towers. We just don't.
Well, and I knew Sam had talked about before, the jail is one of the toughest places for us to staff. We're doing massive overtime with the people that are there. Eventually, you're going to burn them out. So I was hoping if we could create a better work environment for those officers, that we may be able to retain them a little bit better and maybe even recruit.
That is an equal part of this.
Okay.
Because no one wants to work there.
I've toured it. I don't blame
Not
you.
at the top of my list.
No.
Yeah.
But we do have all that in mind as we're doing these housing units. We're, you know, going to be considering the direct supervision, which does take less COs to oversee the inmates, but at the same time, we're dealing with a population that has needs. So
Right.
we're trying to balance that out as well.
Thank you.
Anything else for Christine? Thank you, Christine. Okay. Any further information that you want to provide us with this evening? Okay. So that then will conclude our work session for the budget. I think we have other sessions coming up. When's the next one, Donna? Do you know?
November the 28th.
The
Monday.
28th, okay, 2 weeks from. And I think certain elected officials and others have been invited if they wish to make a presentation or discuss their requests with the council. So we'll look forward to that as well. So we're going to then recess until we start the regular meeting at 7 o'clock. All right, we'll be in recess then.
Thanks for coming.
Yep.
Okay, I can leave that pizza, thank you.